Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. This is Chrissy Raywalk, Director of Intercollegiate Athletics at the University of Delaware. One of the things that I appreciate and enjoy most about leadership is that it's a journey, not a destination. It involves lots of different twists and turns, and you need many different types of people to go along with you on your journey in order for it to be successful. So today, I invite you to start your leadership journey with this podcast. Enjoy.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Also, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review 1Q wherever you listen to podcasts. Our guest today is Jeremy Wang. Jeremy is the Associate Vice President for Development at Temple University. Greetings, Jeremy. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ty. Happy to be here.
I am excited that you're on. Now, you've been in that role since 2019. And of course, you spent time in athletics at Temple as a Senior Associate AD and Assistant Vice President of Development. And also, you worked in development at Berkeley, Villanova, and University of Idaho. And you've been in the industry for almost 15 years. So you have a wealth of experience. Now, of course, you got your start in ticket sales. And a lot of us who work in sports started in ticket sales, right? And your experience spans development in athletics and also on-campus fundraising. And I wonder for you, when you made that transition, what was the appeal to development outside of the athletics department?
Yeah, that's a good question, Ty. I'll work, a little bit backwards, starting with the, appeal of development in general, and then, outside athletics. So for me, I really, over the course of my career and the stops that you've mentioned, fell in love with development and fundraising specifically as a profession, as a career, as a discipline, and raising money and building relationships with people, connecting funders, back to causes that they're passionate about, whether that's an athletic department or whether that's an institution, is really what I enjoy about the work that I do. So for me, higher education was always something I've been around. I grew up around higher education. My father was a professor. He recently, a couple of years ago, retired as the chair of the architecture department at Washington State. And so, my whole life, I've been around higher education and exposed to that. And I always knew in my career that I would hit, a fork in the road at some point. And do I want to pursue more of an athletics administration track, or do I want to pursue more of a development and advancement track? And not that I've closed the door on the athletics administration track. So, you folks that are listening out there today, don't close the door on me, jumping back at some point. But no, I growing up around higher education and really, I'd say that the two formative experience that I had at Villanova and at Cal, I'm really thankful that I was able to work in organizations where the athletics enterprise was very important to that institution. And so my role as the chief fundraiser or the head athletics fundraiser, I was able to really work not just on the senior staff of athletics, but senior staffs and task force and, all that good stuff on the university development and advancement side. And that really exposed me to a depth and breadth of opportunities to have an impact, right? To have an impact on the broader university, to have an impact on students, all over the university, not just within the athletic department.
You mentioned there that you got a chance to spend some time working with committees and working with different areas of campus. I wonder what were some of the insights you learned while you were sitting in those meetings with, now obviously you are a associate vice president, so you're one of the senior leaders, but I guess coming up through your career, you're sitting in these meetings with these high level officials on campus with the university, with athletics, and you definitely probably, for the lack of a better word, were ear hustling and learning how they did things and what they did to be successful. Talk to us a little bit about some of the things you learned as you come up in your career.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that if you're in a seat in athletics or you're in a seat no matter where you are, right, you've got the opportunity to lead from where you're at. Development is a discipline that, fortunately, certainly coming out of the pandemic right now, right? One of the things that we're looking at is there's so many institutions and organizations that are posting development positions, because I think a lot of institutions are realizing that from a finance, from a dollar standpoint, philanthropy continues to be a growing need in what they need to make, not just to keep the core whole and keep their mission moving, but then also advance, right? We're in advancement. So growth and to get better and to, get that competitive edge in athletics, it's really important. I think what I learned is that how much people really rely on you as an expert in this area, right? So when you get into those meetings, you got to step your game up, and your coaches, your athletic director, it could be your president, it could be board members, it could be deans. Like, they're really relying on you for expertise and the ability to be involved and learn from. I mean, I've had some amazing people that I've had a chance to work with and work under who've taught me some really great lessons and tactics and tools in the development space. But then to work with your partners, work with those administrators, work with those leaders on campus, and take their vision and take their need, take what they see, and then marry that up philanthropically with fundable opportunities that'll get donors excited about making investments on your campus has really been a great thing to do. And you can do that no matter where you sit, right? You can do that in an athletic seat. You can do that on an academic seat. You can do that if you're a front-facing annual fund officer. You can do it if you're working in the back of house with stewardship, or you can certainly do it if you're the chief development officer in an organization, right? And so I think one of the things that really encapsulated this is, the adage that we always use: the value of athletics is it's the front porch to the university, right? And so you got to remember in that analogy, the front porch, it's the first thing that people see, but then it opens up this whole household, if you will, right? This whole world of other opportunities. And so, the campaign that I was involved with at Villanova, some of the donors that I worked with at Cal and now at Temple, they're athletic donors, but they give to so many different areas of the institution as well. And so there's a lot of data that's out there, a lot of ink that's been spilt on. If you follow a donor-centered mindset and they give to multiple areas of the institution, their overall giving to the institution increases dramatically when they are participating in multiple areas of an institution, right? And so being able to work with donors and work with colleagues to close, blended gifts or, gifts that would support, certainly athletics, is that's a lot of our donors' first loves, but they're also interested in scholarships. They're interested in research. They're interested in what the overall direction of the institution and how athletics can act as a motor and an accelerator for that direction of the institution. It's really puts you in a good spot to be able to have conversations with the donor about the variety of interests that they have at an institution. And I'm really grateful for, again, the experiences at both Villanova and Cal for affording me that opportunity.
Right. One thing you said there was you have to be able to lead from where you are, right? And I think that's significant for a lot of people who work in athletics, because no matter what position you're in, find the leadership opportunities and execute those leadership opportunities. Give us a little insight on that, lead from where you are.
Ty, I think that development specifically really lends itself to, leaders and leading from where you are, because it's self-starting by nature, right? Especially for those positions where you're on the front face and you're managing a portfolio, which is where my experience is in portfolio management, major gifts, principal gifts. It's on you to be the straw that stirs the drink, right? You got to pick up the phone and make the call. You've got to send the email. You've got to make the connection with the donor. You've got to bring them back and plug them into, opportunities for investment at your institution. And so it lends itself to this, you've got to be a self-starter. You've got to have your own motor. You've got to be inquisitive. You've got to be curious. You've got to be a lifelong learner. Because it takes all of those qualities, but then the world's constantly changing. What motivates people change. I mean, one of the things we've learned in the pandemic is that I think we're going to see a lot of donors who have given loyally to our institutions, and what is important to them has been changed by, what their experience in this pandemic has been. And so there's all these things where it's like, you've got to stay on top of things. You've got to continue to be educated and be the expert, that people are relying on to, guide these conversations as a fundraiser and as a philanthropic advisor to these donors too. And so I think that those opportunities to, bring your best self into a conversation and be knowledgeable and know how to direct conversations, know how to put your leadership in the best possible position to succeed, whether you're working with a coach or whether you're working with an athletic director or a senior administrator. Knowing when to bring to the table those folks and position them for success is just as important in the jobs that we have as well. So people, as I mentioned earlier, people really rely on you and your expertise. And if you can continue to show value as a trusted advisor, a trusted partner, then you're going to have a lot of opportunity for growth in the development field, certainly, but as a leader overall.
That is, you've answered a question I wanted to ask about leadership experience while working in development. I mentioned a couple 1Q interviews ago that I will probably ask that question to everyone I talk to who works in development or who has worked in development, because I think it's important to point that out, because of people who don't work in development see a lot of development people getting to leadership positions, right? And so we want to be able to understand where the leadership opportunities are in development. And your answer just gave us a lot of input in that. Now, when you're working in athletics in fundraising, right? Or you're working on campus in fundraising, I wonder, like, is the performance evaluation structure, is it just based on numbers, or how do they evaluate your success? I guess beyond how much money you've brought in, right? That seems like the simple answer, but how do they evaluate your success in those two different parts of a campus, right?
So I would say, a couple of things to that, Ty. I've got some thoughts on this. The conversation around, certainly gift officer management, performance metrics, and evaluating is a long, long conversation, probably one that, we could fill an hour with. And there's a lot of great information out there online from, podcasts, books. There's been a lot of ink spilt on, how to manage gift officers effectively. And so I would say that, it depends. In athletics and in the academic side, if you're in a mature shop, they're probably more similar than they're not. And as an overarching thing, I would say that the people that would say that athletics is different or academics is different or healthcare fundraising is different, there are ways that they are different. But as it relates to development, my opinion is that they're not different hardly at all. I mean, good development process, tactics, skills, your skills as a fundraiser translate no matter what the cause or the purpose is that you're raising money for. The performance evaluation piece of that is obviously the day-to-day piece on, dollars, proposals asked, proposals delivered, qualifying new donors. Those should be in a mature fundraising shop the same for athletics as they are for the academic side. Now, where they're different is in the priorities, right? And so there's a large conversation that we always have is, where does philanthropy equal revenue and where does philanthropy not equal revenue when you're looking at, your bottom line or your budget as far as cash that you can spend now, right? And I think that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, when it took away the seat deduction on or the tax deduction on seats, right, a couple of years ago, really threw this into stark light. And so I think you see a lot of shops on the athletic side moving towards, okay, are fundraisers really focused on the purely philanthropic conversations, and maybe some of the seat licenses or the per seat payments are run out of your ticket office now. I think there's some organizations that are doing it that way. I think there's a lot of other organizations where their fundraisers are moving more into being quote unquote revenue generators, right? So you're raising gifts, but you're also selling premium seats or ticket packages or some of those things. And there's a lot of models out there that are doing it in different ways. And so I would say that I think it was at a NAD convention a couple of years ago. I think it was Ren Baker, the AD at North Texas. He had him speak, and he said in athletics, some of the most valuable people are the annual fund fundraisers that can raise unrestricted cash that an athletic director can spend today. And I think that's something where you may feel, let's just call it, some tension between what is the university side of things trying to push, and they might be looking at capital gifts or planned deferred and estate gifts or gifts in kind or more or different types of gifts, as opposed to cash today, which, as we all know, working in this business, is cash is king, and cash that an athletic director can spend on whatever the priority is in the moment is what the priority is. And so I think that's probably where you see maybe the biggest difference is you might have some fundraisers that are measured on metrics that are total dollars raised as is counted by the metric by case and by the university advancement shop, versus just, hey, we need a part of your metric in athletics certainly to be current use cash that we can go ahead and use today. And that's just meeting the needs of the department. And you'll have schools and colleges, and you'll have different units on the academic side that'll have similar needs, right? Like, yes, there's overall goals that we need to hit, but then what are the specific needs that an athletic department or a school or college has. And, hopefully as a fundraiser, bringing it back to the metrics question, you are being measured on not just something that's canned and everyone's getting measured on the same things, but individualized metrics that speak to your work, your longevity, and the maturity of your portfolio and the priorities of the unit or department that you're in.
I wonder in those setups, who sets the direction? Who is or who are the people or person who decides, here's what we need, here are our goals, here's what we will be evaluated on at the end? Like, is it a combination of the chief development officer for athletics, the athletics director, and then the person over on campus who's in, like, talk to me a little bit about that. It probably can get into a convoluted conversation, but just an example you've seen or worked in on who sets some of those metrics.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ty. And I don't want to nerd out too much on you guys on,
I'm
development
with you, right?
structures,
Yeah.
but, everyone's doing it differently. You have decentralized organizations. You have universities that have their operations set up as a foundation, which is a separate 501c3. You have, really centralized programs where everybody reports into, one line. And so, I think that I've been fortunate to work in a lot of these different things, right? At Berkeley and Temple, we're decentralized. And so there's a lot of split funding and a lot of split reporting lines. At Villanova, we were very centrally vertically integrated, which, resulted in sort of, very sort of clear metrics and goals, but it was driven from one spot, right? And so, again, I'll say it again, because I said this is one of your earlier questions, is it depends. It depends on the culture of your institution, the maturity of your fundraising shop, how it's set up, where the report lines are, where the budget lines come from. But I do think that any good goal setting process, whether you're in development or you're in any other line of work, it's a open, transparent, and collaborative conversation that you're having with the people who all need to be involved. And let's just make some generalizations. In a university setting with fundraising, if you've got the chief development officer or the unit head, you've got your athletic director, and then let's say there is some sort of relationship with, central university advancement, that's a conversation that all three of those parties are having, with the priority being, I view my role as the AVP that's in central is to really support the goals and the priorities of each individual school and college unit that I support, right? So we will, say, hey, we've got goals and things we'd like to see, but ultimately, like, what does it matter, our goals and numbers if the dollars that are being raised aren't, making an impact and having an effect and moving the needle for the athletic department and the student athletes who we're all here to serve, right?
Right. Yeah. Excellent information. I'll ask one more question down that line and then we'll switch topics. You said something earlier which sounded like it may have been a simplification, but it may not have been a simplification. So, in order to not make an assumption, I want to ask you about it. You mentioned in athletics, you might be working in the annual fund, you may be working in stewardship, or you may be along the lines of a chief development officer. You mentioned the annual fund, which Renbreaker has talked about, and he spoke to that about that in a video on a podcast, and you mentioned at a conference, like he talks about a lot how important the annual fund person will be. Talk to us a little bit about the stewardship part of development in an athletics department. I'm not sure I fully understand what I understand about the word is developing the relationship.
Yep.
Leading towards us, but there's a whole, I guess, aspect of that in athletics. Talk to me a little bit about that.
So, it's all one virtuous cycle, right? At the end of the day, the gift is the result of a donor's holistic relationship with your organization. And so, a lot of people, they make gifts, but then if they aren't stewarded properly for that gift, like it's either really hard to get that second or third gift, or you might not get it at all, right? And so, I know that there's a lot of focus on the front facing side of the equation. So who's the fundraiser that's going out and making the ask, and who's the major gift officer that's managing the portfolio and X, Y, and Z, right? And I think one of the things that I'll say this: as I look to continue to grow as a leader and a professional, I'm very aware of I need to make sure I do a better job of recognizing, the stewardship staff, the gift processing staff, the people that aren't, on the front facing side, because their jobs are just as important to donor experience, and delivering on the promises that you make to a donor of, hey, we're going to show you the impact that it has, or hey, you're going to, if a large gift comes with a naming on this, like, hey, we're going to make sure we get the naming right and the signage is going to be appropriate with your family, and so on and so forth. And so that donor experience, once they've made the gift, good stewardship is really in a lot of ways, just good cultivation for that donor to make a next gift. Because if they make a gift and are stewarded really, really well, the work that the fundraiser is going to have to do to cultivate for the next gift is almost, 80-90% of the way done already for them, because they've had such a great experience and they've seen the impact of what their investment has made on the lives of student athletes, or the direction of the program or the direction of the university. So, think of it as that virtuous cycle that, we need to make sure that we are making sure that our donors have really good experiences once they've made their gift, and not just, hey, they've made their gift, we've gotten the money, and then, it's just kind of catch as catch can. We need to be putting a lot of attention.
We'll call you next year when we need more money kind of
Exactly. Yep.
situation,
Yeah.
right?
Because
You want
again, it's
yeah.
that relationship, right? Don't be the fundraiser that only calls and they go, oh, they only call me when they're asking for money. You're that conduit between the donor and the institution, so that the relationship that you have is important. Yes, but the real relationship is the donor and the organization.
Excellent insight. So it seems to me from this conversation, you are very knowledgeable about the inner workings of fundraising in higher education, including athletics. But what I understand now is that you are actually leaving Temple here in a little bit to go to work for Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Talk to us about that decision, the position you will be taking, and your thoughts on getting out of higher education.
Yeah. Good question, Ty. Yes, I am preparing to depart from Temple and go to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia to work in their foundation. I mentioned to you previously, like, everyone's career sort of moves and paths are so intensely personal, right? Everyone's got their reason for making the changes and the switches that they want. And so, for me, being a native Philadelphian and having kind of ping ponged back and forth between the coasts, to work at Temple's an amazing organization. There's so many amazing universities and institutions in the city of Philadelphia. I'm fortunate that I have the privilege of applying my trade in this city, because there's so many great organizations that you can do this type of work for, and CHOP is certainly one of those things. So I think, still mentally processing the move, but again, in trying to be a lifelong learner and being curious and wanting to, as I mentioned off the top, really finding joy in that. How can I make a difference in this world by connecting, funders to institutions that they're passionate about? I'm really excited about the opportunity to learn healthcare. Certainly have that on my resume. So to have athletics, higher education, and healthcare on my resume, hopefully is appealing for whatever is down the road. But in the here and now, and just being present, I'm really excited to just be a sponge and learn and develop my skills, certainly as a fundraiser in this new area, but also as a leader and someone who will be hopefully doing some great things with an amazing team at CHOP.
Yeah, which will be excellent. It will be interesting to follow your progress as you get to know the inner workings of the healthcare fundraising apparatus, right? Because what you've learned and what you've actually just educated me on in terms of development in higher education seems like it's intricate but different almost everywhere you go. So I will say though, you will still have a purpose, and I guess some would say probably a greater purpose when you're raising money for the Children's Hospital, right? So I wonder about your thoughts on coming into it with, the bottom line for college athletics is to support student athletes, support education, support students in general. And now your bottom line for Children's Hospital is to support these kids who are going through whatever situations they are going through, kids and families, and making sure the hospital has what it needs to support these kids. Any thoughts on that little intricacy there?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I don't know that I would ever say that one mission is greater than other.
Right.
I think that again, as a fundraiser, as I mentioned kind of at the top, like good fundraising skills translate no matter what mission you are supporting, right? And I love higher education. I think, and especially athletics, which will always be my first love. Access to education through athletics is such a noble cause. You have just going back all the way to the Greeks, right? And it was what was the Platonic ideal of a person, and it was the scholar athlete, I think, is what he wrote. Sound mind, sound body. And I think that is something that still really, really rings true today in the work that people do on the athletic side. And so, yes, whether it's helping, children get healthy and live normal lives, whether it's providing scholarship access and, the ability for first generation college students to, attend a university like Temple and have, upward social mobility. I mean, all of these missions are really amazing and really wonderful things to work for. And it's a privilege, right? It's a privilege for us that are in these roles that we are able to go out and have conversations with folks who want to make an investment in our nonprofits and change lives and change the world. No matter what that mission is, it's our privilege to pick up the phone and build a relationship and build that connection to the point to where the result of that relationship is a donor giving back to support, whether it's a sick child, whether it's a first generation student, or whether it's a, student athlete who is, really living out that ideal of, sound mind, sound body in our college athletics programs. So I'm really excited to see what I can learn, but, I have so much admiration for this discipline and this craft of fundraising and development, no matter what it is you're raising money for. It's such a noble profession, and it's brought me so much joy and fulfillment in my life.
Yeah, and I am sure that Temple University has been happy to have you on campus to work with their donors, students, and student athletes and staff and administration there. And I am also probably sure that Children's Hospital of Philadelphia is happy that you are coming on. Jeremy, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Thank you, Ty. The pleasure was mine.
That was Jeremy Wang. He is currently the Associate Vice President for Development at Temple University, on his way to work in fundraising for Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today.
This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.